Welcome, dear dreamer, to the Sleeping Hourglass. Tonight, we travel together into the life of a man who wrote not with the ink of sleep, but with the ink of awakening. A man whose words once set hearts racing, but who, in this hour, will guide us with gentleness. Jose Rizal, poet, doctor, dreamer, martyr. His story is one of sorrow and sacrifice, yes, but also of love and tenderness, of a soul who carried the longing of millions in the fragile lantern of his body. If you find comfort here, in these slow, lantern-lit journeys, you're welcome to return to keep this gentle space alive. A small gesture, like subscribing or leaving a note, helps this hourglass keep flowing grain by grain, story by story. But of course, only if it feels right, only if it feels soft. The town of Calamba lies cradled by the wide embrace of Laguna de Bay, a lake that gleams like a sheet of glass beneath the Philippine sun. Around it rise green hills and fertile fields, their rhythm guided by the cycle of rain and harvest. It is here, in this gentle setting, that a child first opens his eyes to the world. The year is 1861, the date June 19. The boy is named Jose Rizal Mercado y Alonso Rayalonda. The world he is born into is both tender and fraught. Tender, because his family is one of love and learning, bound together by faith and tradition. Fraught, because beyond the gates of his childhood home, Spain's colonial shadow stretches long across the islands. Yet for now, the boy's earliest moments are not of empire or oppression, but of warmth. He grows up in a stone house, its windows open to the fields where carabaos plough the earth and children run barefoot in the sun. The air smells of rice husks drying and of lake water carried by the breeze. His parents, Francisco Mercado and Teodoro Alonso, are not wealthy aristocrats, but neither are they poor peasants. They belong to that delicate in-between. A family respected, educated, yet still under the gaze of Spanish friars who hold power over land and soul alike. Within this space, Jose is shaped by love and discipline. His father, Francisco, is quiet and hardworking, a farmer who values perseverance more than wealth. His mother, Teodora, is educated, strong-willed, and unafraid to speak her mind. She will become his first teacher, his compass in both word and conscience. The boy's earliest days pass in the rhythm of rural life. He listens to the clatter of pestles pounding rice in the kitchens, the creak of carts rolling over dirt roads, the songs sung at dusk as neighbors gather after work. He is small, frail even, but his eyes are wide and searching, while other children shout and wrestle in the yard. Jose often stands apart, gazing at the horizon where the lake meets the sky. Already, there is something in him that belongs to silence. In the evenings, the family gathers together, the lamplight casting a golden glow upon the walls. It is here that stories take root, tales of ancestors, of saints, of old battles fought and lost. Young Jose listens more than he speaks. Each word he absorbs becomes part of him, quietly shaping the poet and thinker he will become. His mother reads to him, guiding his lips over prayers and verses. His siblings laugh, play, and argue, yet in the midst of the noise, he carves a small sanctuary within himself, a place where thought can grow. Calamba itself is a teacher. The town's fields stretch wide, teaching patience through the slowness of crops ripening under sun and rain. The lake teaches him wonder, for its moods change daily, sometimes calm, sometimes fierce with storm. The mountains in the distance whisper permanence, while the rivers sing of passage. Nature, in all its quiet grandeur, plants in him a deep sense of connection to land and people. He will carry this bond all his life, even when oceans separate him from his home. Childhood is not without its sorrows. Jose learns early that illness hovers always near. He suffers from weak eyesight, straining to see the world clearly. His small body is prone to sickness, and his mother worries over him constantly. Perhaps it is this frailty that draws him inward, that makes him more contemplative than most children his age. Where strength fails, imagination takes root. He begins to sketch, to mold figures from clay, to scribble poems in childish handwriting. His family marvels at his talents, but to him they are simply ways of making sense of the vast and mysterious world around him. He is also introduced early to the weight of injustice. Though still young, he senses the differences in how people are treated. Spaniards with privilege, friars with unchecked authority, and Indios like himself with boundaries placed upon every step. One day, he witnesses a guardia civil strike a Filipino for a small offense. The image etches itself into his mind, not with anger yet, but with a deep, wordless unease. It is the beginning of a quiet awareness that something in the world is not as it should be. Yet even as shadows stir, the light of family anchors him. Teodora teaches him his letters, his prayers, and the value of virtue. She insists on discipline, urging him to sharpen his mind as much as his manners. Francisco, though less strict, embodies the dignity of labor, showing his son that true worth lies in effort, not in titles. In the space between them, Jose learns balance, the stern call of conscience from his mother, the steady endurance of his father. As he grows, the boy becomes attuned to solitude. He often wanders to the fields alone, watching dragonflies dart above the paddies. He climbs trees and gazes at the stars, whispering poems only he can hear. The other children may not always understand him, but his inner world blooms in silence. He feels, though he cannot yet name it, that he is destined for something beyond himself, not in grandeur, but in service. The boy of Calamba does not yet know that his words will one day shake an empire, or that his death will awaken a nation. For now, he is simply a child held by the arms of family and land, listening to the quiet teachings of soil, water, and sky. The foundations of his life are being laid gently, almost invisibly, lessons of love, patience, imagination, and justice. These are the seeds. They wait, buried in the hush of childhood, for the season when they must bloom. And so his story begins not with shouts, nor with the clash of swords, but with the soft sound of waves upon the shore of Laguna de Bay, and with the heartbeat of a boy listening to the world around him. History, though vast, often begins in the stillness of a cradle, in the gaze of a child. In the quiet of Calamba, Jose learns first from his mother's hands and voice. It is she who becomes his earliest guide, and it is to her that we now turn, the compass of his childhood, the light of his earliest years. In every great life, there is often a voice that whispers first, shaping the soul before the world makes its demands. For Jose Rizal, that voice belongs to his mother, Teodora Alonso Rilonda. She is not simply the woman who cradles him in infancy. She is the one who molds his conscience, his imagination, his very way of seeing. To speak of Rizal's childhood without her is to miss the steady light that guided him through the early corridors of his life. Teodora is a woman of both gentleness and resolve. Born into a family that values education, she herself is well-read and disciplined, unusual for women of her time. Her mind is sharp, her faith unshakable, her dignity firm even in the face of hardship. To her son, she is both a mother and a mentor, soft in affection, yet unyielding in principle. He will later say that his earliest lessons in truth, in virtue, in love for God and for others, all come from her hands. Morning begins in their Calamba household not with the sound of roosters alone, but with her voice, leading prayers. She gathers her children, teaching them to fold their hands, to bow their heads, to listen not only with their ears but with their hearts. For young Jose, prayer becomes more than ritual. It becomes a rhythm of attention, a way of seeing the world as imbued with meaning. Through her, he learns that faith is not merely spoken, it is lived through compassion and justice. But Teodora is not a mother who indulges idleness. She believes that the mind must be sharpened, the heart disciplined. With patience, she teaches Jose his letters, guiding his small fingers across the page. She recites verses and asks him to memorize them, planting the seeds of poetry in his young imagination. At times she insists he read aloud, his voice halting, his eyes straining, for already his eyesight falters. Yet she encourages him gently, telling him that weakness of body can be overcome by strength of spirit. Her discipline is firm, but never cruel. When Jose errs, she corrects him with clarity, always explaining why truth matters more than convenience, why honesty outshines cleverness. To her, integrity is not negotiable. In this way, she becomes not only his teacher of letters, but his teacher of conscience. Later, when Rizal stands in trial before an empire, it will be her lessons echoing in his heart. The belief that dignity cannot be purchased, nor truth silenced. There is also imagination in her teaching. Teodora introduces her son to the wonder of stories. Stories from the Bible, from history, from folk tradition. She tells him of the heroes of the past, of saints who endured, of nations that rose and fell. Each story becomes a window, and the boy gazes through with eager eyes. In these tales, he discovers not only the glory of courage, but the quiet strength of endurance. The world, through her voice, expands beyond the fields of Calamba. At times, she reads aloud poetry, her voice lilting like song. Jose listens with rapture, feeling the beauty of words even before he fully understands their meaning. Something awakens in him, the desire not only to listen, but to create. He begins to shape his own verses, small poems scribbled in childish script. His mother encourages him, delighting in his attempts, yet also reminding him that beauty must always serve goodness. A mind without virtue, she says, is like a lamp without oil. It may shine for a moment, but soon it darkens. These words will stay with him, becoming the measure by which he judges both himself and others. Life, however, does not spare her from trials. When Jose is still a child, Teodora is falsely accused of poisoning a relative. In truth, she is innocent, but envy and politics conspire against her. She is imprisoned for 2 years, torn from her family, forced to bear the weight of injustice. For the young boy, it is a wound, to see the woman who embodies truth treated with cruelty. Yet even in chains, she does not yield. Her dignity remains unbroken, her faith unshaken. From her, Jose learns that justice may be delayed, but it cannot be destroyed. In her suffering, he sees that silence can be stronger than shouting, that patience can outlast cruelty. When at last she returns home, thinner but unbowed, the family embraces her with tears. For Jose, her return is more than a reunion, it is a lesson carved into memory. He understands now that the world is not always fair, that goodness may suffer under power, but he also sees that resilience can carry the human spirit beyond despair. This lesson, too, he will carry into his own exile, his own imprisonment, his own death. Through all this, Teodora's love remains steady. She tends not only to his education, but also to his health. His weak eyes trouble her, and she spares no effort to ease them. She encourages him to draw close to books, to use his mind as his sight. She calls him Pepe, the family's affectionate name for him, softening her sternness with warmth. To her, he is not yet the nation's hero, not yet the martyr. He is simply her son, fragile yet full of promise. Evenings return again and again, marked by the glow of oil lamps and the sound of her voice guiding him. Learn to think, Pepe, she tells him. Learn to feel for others. Do not let pride make you blind. The boy listens, not always fully understanding, but always absorbing. Her words sink into him like seeds into earth, waiting for the right season to bloom. The shaping of a hero is never sudden. It is not forged only in the fire of public struggle, but in the quiet chiseling of the home, in the steady rhythm of a mother's hand teaching, correcting, guiding. For Rizal, that hand belongs to Teodora. She is his first compass, the one who sets his path toward truth before he even knows where it will lead. And so, in the hush of Calamba nights, with the stars above and the lake whispering beyond the fields, a boy grows beneath the watchful eyes of his mother. The lessons of prayer, of imagination, of discipline, of compassion, they gather within him like hidden light. In time, this light will shine upon a nation. But for now, it flickers gently in the heart of a child, warmed by a mother's guiding hand. From his mother's strength, Jose learns to carry both tenderness and truth. Soon, others beyond Calamba will notice the boy's gifts, the whispers of genius that begin to stir in his quiet soul. In the gentle rhythm of childhood, there comes a moment when play shifts into something more. When a child's hands, restless with curiosity, begin to shape not just toys, but the outlines of destiny. For Jose Rizal, this moment arrives early, while other children still chase dragonflies and splash by the riverbanks. He sits quietly with a piece of charcoal, sketching the world as he sees it. His small fingers trace lines with surprising precision, capturing forms of trees, animals, and the familiar face of his mother. Those who look over his shoulder see not just the scribbles of a boy, but the beginnings of something rare. It is as though the world itself speaks to him in whispers. Whispers he catches with pen and paper, with clay and wood. He molds figures from wax and soft earth, tiny sculptures of animals and saints, their shapes delicate, alive with detail. His siblings laugh in admiration, neighbors shake their heads in wonder. This child, they say, is no ordinary boy. By the age of 8, Jose is already weaving words into poems. His first verses are simple, yet they shimmer with unusual grace. He writes of birds in flight, of the tender bond between mother and child, of the quiet dignity of his hometown. His family treasures these poems, reading them aloud with pride. Yet even they do not fully grasp the depth stirring within him. A depth that sets him apart from the laughter and games of childhood. The teachers who meet him notice it too. They see in him not only quickness of memory, but a hunger to learn. He listens with an intensity rare for a child, as though every lesson contains a secret waiting to be uncovered. He memorizes entire passages with ease, solves problems quickly, and often goes beyond what is asked. But brilliance is not always easy to bear. Where others see opportunity, Jose sometimes feels the weight of difference. His mind races ahead, but his heart lingers in solitude. For genius, even in its earliest whispers, carries with it a quiet distance. He is praised, admired, sometimes envied. Other children do not always understand his stillness, his tendency to drift into thought while they play. He joins them at times, running through the fields, laughing under the sun. Yet part of him remains apart, watching from a quiet place within. It is as though he inhabits two worlds, one of ordinary childhood, the other of imagination and reflection. He begins to notice details others overlook: the way light falls across the lake at dusk, the way a farmer's hand trembles after a day's labor, the way a bird hovers before it takes flight. He writes these images down, not always knowing why, only sensing that they matter. His notebooks, filled with sketches and verses, become his secret companions. At home, his mother continues to nurture his gifts. She encourages his poems, praises his drawings, and reads to him stories of saints and heroes. Each tale he hears becomes fuel for his imagination, and he begins to dream of worlds beyond Calamba. Yet even as he dreams, he feels a tinge of solitude. For who, at his age, can truly understand the restless stirrings of a boy who writes verses at midnight? It is in these early years that his first awareness of destiny stirs. Not destiny in the sense of grandeur or fame, but a quiet inner calling, the sense that his life will not belong to him alone. When he writes a poem, it is not merely for himself, it is for the ears of others, for the soul of his people. Though he cannot yet name it, though he cannot yet grasp its shape, a seed has been planted deep within. The small town of Calamba begins to notice. Teachers speak of him with admiration. Neighbors call him the pride of the Mercado family. Some whisper expectations, imagining a future priest, scholar, or doctor. Yet Jose himself remains quiet, almost shy. He does not boast of his talents. Instead, he withdraws, as though aware that too much attention can isolate more than it uplifts. He finds solace not in crowds but in books, in the pages where words open entire worlds. Books become his companions. He devours fables, histories, and religious texts. He learns not just facts, but the cadence of language, the music of expression. Through reading, he discovers that words can build bridges across silence, that they can carry thought from one heart to another. Already, he senses that words are not mere tools. They are weapons, they are lanterns, they are seeds. But even in brilliance, there is vulnerability. His frail health continues to trouble him. At times, headaches force him to rest. His weak eyesight blurs the pages he longs to read. His body lags behind the quickness of his mind, and he feels frustration. Yet in this fragility, perhaps, lies part of his strength. It teaches him patience. It teaches him that power is not always found in muscle or in speed, but in persistence. His genius grows not in leaps, but in quiet, steady steps. Even as a boy, he learns the cost of being different. Some children tease him for his seriousness, calling him aloof. Others avoid him, sensing in him a depth that unsettles. He smiles gently, but inside he feels the sting of solitude. Yet instead of bitterness, he turns to creation. His poems become his friends, his sketches his confidence. In them, he pours the loneliness he cannot express aloud. One day, he writes a verse about a firefly glowing in the dark, small yet luminous. The family reads it with delight. But Jose feels a deeper meaning, that even the smallest light can push back the shadows. Though he is still only a child, he begins to glimpse the role he may one day play, a light in darkness, fragile yet unextinguished. Genius is rarely loud in its beginnings. It often whispers, testing its voice in small acts, a drawing, a poem, a figure molded from clay. In Jose, these whispers gather strength, quietly preparing him for the largest stage of history. For now, he is still a boy, living under the wide skies of Laguna, crafting verses in the hush of evening. But already the solitude, the brilliance, the yearning, they mark him as one who will never fully belong to the ordinary path. The boy listens to the whispers of genius, and the world, though it does not yet know it, is listening too. The brilliance of the child glimmers quietly, but the world beyond Calamba waits with shadows of prejudice and constraint. Soon, the lessons of Manila will test both his gifts and his spirit, sharpening the edges of his awakening. The road from Calamba to Manila is more than a journey across distance. It is a passage from boyhood into the edge of a harsher world. The boy who once studied by the lamplight of his mother's hand-stitched lessons now enters the city, where knowledge is guarded by stone walls, by priests in long robes, and by the hidden chains of a colonial order. Manila in the mid-19th century is a place of contradiction. Outside its walls, the air smells of salt and river reeds, but inside one finds narrow streets lined with stone houses, their windows shaded by capiz shells. It is a city at once bustling and restrained. Spanish soldiers patrol, merchants haggle, and friars oversee schools that promise learning yet often deny dignity. Into this world walks a young Jose, his eyes wide with hope, his steps light, with the eagerness of one who believes that books might unlock a universe. He enters the Ateneo Municipal, a school run by Jesuits. The Jesuits are men of discipline, of order, and of precision. They demand neatness in penmanship, clarity in thought, and rigor in obedience. For a boy raised on the quiet steadiness of his mother's guidance, this world of sharp lines and strict rules feels strangely familiar. He thrives in it. Each essay he writes, each lesson he memorizes is like another rung on a ladder reaching skyward. Soon, his name rises to the top of his class. Teachers look upon him with admiration. Classmates see in him a boy whose brilliance cannot be ignored. His notebooks are filled not just with assigned lessons, but with sketches, poems, and reflections. His imagination roams beyond the confines of the classroom. Yet even here, in the corridors of learning, he feels the whisper of being marked. Filipino, Indio, child of a land ruled but not respected. The Jesuits may reward him for excellence, but the society around the schoolyard walls reminds him daily of the divide. Rizal endures this divide quietly, with the same patience he learned at home. He sharpens his mind the way one sharpens a blade, quietly, deliberately, knowing that the edge will one day be needed. At Ateneo, he earns not only high marks but also a sense of discipline that will carry him through storms ahead. He learns languages, Latin, Greek, Spanish, and masters them with the care of a craftsman carving wood. He finds solace in literature, strength in philosophy, and even a measure of joy in fencing and art. Yet behind every achievement lies the faint shadow of limitation, as though the crown he is allowed to wear is one always tilted, never quite fitting, because of the land and blood he comes from. From Ateneo, he moves to the University of Santo Tomas. Here the world grows colder. The atmosphere shifts from the measured discipline of Jesuit classrooms to the heavy corridors of Dominican oversight. It is at Santo Tomas where Rizal begins to feel not just the quiet reminder of his difference, but its sharp sting. Professors, cloaked in the authority of empire and faith, often dismiss native students. Spanish pupils are treated with deference, while Filipinos are reminded, subtly and openly, of their place. For a young man whose soul thirsts for justice and fairness, this atmosphere is suffocating. He continues his studies, philosophy, medicine, law, but he feels his spirit weighed down. The lectures do not silence his mind, but they wound his heart. Stories circulate among students of insults, of prejudices, of punishments delivered more harshly to Filipinos than to Spaniards. Rizal witnesses these realities not just in rumor, but in his own encounters. His questions are brushed aside, his presence sometimes diminished. And yet, out of this climate of injustice, something begins to stir in him. The wound becomes a wellspring. He begins to write more fervently, poems that carry within them both beauty and quiet defiance. He observes the world around him not with resignation, but with sharpened clarity. If Ateneo polished his brilliance, Santo Tomas awakens his resistance. The city becomes not only his classroom, but also his teacher. He sees the poverty of the native people, the arrogance of those in power, and the frailty of a system built on division. He walks through Manila's streets, past Binondo where merchants trade, past Intramuros where Spanish authority gathers, past the river where small boats carry the weight of native labor. He listens to the stories of common folk, to the grievances whispered in corners. Each story is like a thread weaving itself into the larger fabric of his awakening. He begins to understand that knowledge alone is not enough. It must be paired with courage, with purpose, with a willingness to challenge what has long been accepted. At times, he feels isolated. His brilliance sets him apart from many of his peers, while his heritage sets him apart from those who hold power. It is a solitude that cuts both ways, lonely, yet clarifying. In this solitude, he begins to find his voice. The essays he writes no longer speak only of abstract ideals. They begin to echo with the real burdens of his people. His pen becomes sharper, more deliberate, like a chisel against stone. He realizes that Manila, for all its prejudice, is also a crucible. It is shaping him not merely into a scholar, but into something more. Someone who must carry not only his own dreams, but also the silent hopes of those around him. The lessons he learns in Manila are thus not confined to books. They are lessons of endurance, of injustice, of resilience. They teach him that the world is not fair, that power is not always just, and that silence is dangerous. These are lessons that sting, but they are also lessons that prepare. Years later, he will recall this time not with bitterness alone, but with gratitude for the fire it lit within him. For, without the walls of prejudice pressing upon him, perhaps the strength of his resistance would not have been forged so deeply. In Manila, Rizal learns that knowledge alone cannot heal a wounded land. It must be wielded like a sword of the spirit against the weight of injustice. And so, with pen in hand and questions unspoken, he turns his gaze beyond the city toward new horizons of study and awakening that await him in Europe. The year turns and the young man stands at the edge of departure. Behind him, the islands cradle his childhood, the familiar trees of Calamba, The shores of Laguna de Bay, the quiet rhythm of a people bound beneath a distant crown. Ahead of him stretches the sea, endless, restless, and unknown. It is both barrier and bridge, a line that divides what he has been from what he is to become. Jose Rizal boards the ship with a heart both heavy and light. Heavy, for he leaves his family, his homeland, the voices that raised him. Light, for his soul hungers for the vastness of the world. For books he has not yet touched, ideas he has not yet encountered, freedoms he has only imagined. The deck groans beneath his step, the sails billow above him, and the salt air greets him like a stern but honest friend. The ocean has always been a stage for transformation. Sailors, exiles, and dreamers alike have entrusted their lives to its uncertain waves. Rizal joins them now, a solitary figure leaning against the rail, eyes searching the horizon. The Philippines shrinks into memory, its green hills dissolving into a line of mist until at last it disappears. He does not wave goodbye. Instead, he folds the moment into silence. He knows he will carry it always. Days on the sea stretch long and indistinguishable. Morning bleeds into noon, and noon into the slow fire of sunset. The ocean teaches patience, rhythm, surrender. Rizal reads when the deck is calm, studies the currents of European thought in the pages of books he carries. At night, beneath constellations strange yet familiar, he thinks of his people. Farmers in the fields, children learning their prayers, mothers carrying burdens heavier than their bodies. In their silence, he hears the reason for his voyage. The ship becomes its own world. A mosaic of faces from different lands passes before him, merchants bound for trade. Soldiers dreaming of distant glory, travelers seeking fortune or forgetting. Rizal observes them with quiet curiosity, sketching in his notebook, listening to their tales. Each accent, each story reminds him that the world is larger than empire, richer than any single nation. It confirms what he has long suspected, that truth cannot be contained by borders, nor can justice. Storms come. The sea, so calm in its blue expanse, rises in fury, waves striking the hull with merciless force. The ship groans, ropes strain, and passengers clutch at prayers. Rizal does not tremble. He watches, wide-eyed, as lightning stitches the sky. In this chaos, he sees a reflection of his own land, fragile, battered, yet clinging to hope. The storm passes, as storms do, leaving the air sharp with renewal. He breathes it in, as though it were a vow. Between storms and calm, the days blur again. Rizal writes letters he cannot yet send, words to his family, to his mentors, to the future he dreams might unfold. He sketches the outlines of cities he has never seen, their domes and towers pieced together from imagination and hearsay. He wonders how Madrid will greet him, with welcome or with indifference. Yet in his heart, he knows, he does not travel for applause. He travels for knowledge, for the strength of mind and spirit that will allow him to return one day, not as a son bound by silence, but as a man who carries freedom in his hands. The ocean has a way of reshaping memory. The further he drifts from the islands, the sharper his homeland becomes in his thoughts. He remembers the laughter of his siblings, the guiding hand of his mother, the stern encouragement of his father. He remembers the injustice he witnessed in Manila, the prejudice, the humiliation endured by those who bore the name Indio. All of it swells within him, as relentless as the tide. Every mile of water he crosses does not take him farther from the Philippines, it binds him closer. One evening, as the sun sinks into a molten sea, Rizal leans against the rail and whispers to himself. He speaks not in Spanish, but in Tagalog, the language of his heart. He promises that whatever he learns across the ocean, whatever knowledge and vision the wider world grants him, he will return it to his people. He will not be seduced by distance, nor blinded by privilege. He will remain their son. The sea listens, carrying his vow in ripples that vanish into the horizon. At last, after weeks that feel both endless and fleeting, the outlines of Europe rise from the mist. The ship draws closer to port, and Rizal feels a tremor within him. A mixture of anticipation and resolve, he steps onto foreign soil with the humility of a student and the quiet fire of a dreamer. Behind him lies the Pacific, vast and unyielding, a reminder of the courage it took to leave. Before him lies Madrid, with its libraries, its salons, its promises of freedom spoken in voices both cautious and bold. He does not know yet how Europe will shape him. He does not know the faces he will meet, the words he will write, the struggles that await him. But he knows this: the crossing has changed him. The sea has taught him that boundaries are illusions, that every shore connects to another. It has whispered to him that freedom is possible, that justice may yet be born from suffering. And so he begins his life in Europe, carrying with him the quiet strength of islands and the restless memory of waves. He is still the son of Calamba, but now also a traveller, a bridge, a witness to the wider world. The crossing is complete, yet its echoes will guide him always. And as he steps into Madrid, he does not yet realize that the city will awaken him. That within its streets and libraries, he will discover not only knowledge, but the fire of ideas that can set nations alight. And the ship has delivered him, and the sea's endless horizon fades into streets of stone and shadow. Madrid greets Jose Rizal not with ceremony, but with quiet vastness, wide boulevards, tiled roofs, and libraries heavy with the scent of ink and dust. For a son of Calamba, raised under the gaze of rice fields and lake waters, the city is both alien and alluring. Here, every corner seems to whisper of history, every street carries echoes of empire and rebellion. Rizal steps into this world as a student, modest in bearing yet restless in spirit. He enrolls at the Universidad Central de Madrid, taking up the study of medicine with a steady, disciplined hand. He lingers in lecture halls where anatomy is revealed with the precision of science, where human frailty is dissected with cold clarity. He bends over microscopes, his eyes tracing veins and tissues, learning how the body suffers and how it may be healed. Medicine, for him, is never just craft, it is an act of compassion, a promise to ease the pain of others. Yet Madrid offers him more than medicine. Beyond the walls of the university, the city hums with debate. Cafes brim with voices, students, reformists, poets, and exiles arguing over the future of Spain and its colonies. Smoke curls above their heads as words fly sharper than blades. Rizal listens, at first quietly, then with growing boldness. He discovers that in these circles thought itself is resistance, and language is power. He begins to read voraciously. Books pile upon his desk, volumes of philosophy, politics, history. He studies Rousseau and Voltaire, Cervantes and Hugo, learning how words have toppled kings and emboldened nations. Each page seems to whisper a secret long buried in him, that his homeland, too, can awaken, that injustice can be named, and once named, can be fought. The Spanish capital, in all its grandeur and contradiction, becomes his classroom. He sees a nation wrestling with its own identity, with questions of monarchy, reform, and freedom. In Madrid, he is no longer the boy marked Indio. In Manila's classrooms, he is a thinker among thinkers, his mind unshackled by the colonial contempt that shadowed his youth. Yet even in this relative freedom, he never forgets. He walks the city's avenues with the memory of his people carried like a second heartbeat. In evenings, he gathers with the propaganda movement, a group of Filipinos who, far from home, dream of reform. They are lawyers, writers, students, all bound by a shared ache for justice. Around wooden tables, they share news from the islands, stories of oppression, visions of liberty. Their laughter carries, but beneath it runs a current of urgency. They know they cannot remain silent. Rizal, with his sharp mind and quiet resolve, soon becomes a voice among them. But he is not only a man of gatherings. Often, he withdraws into solitude, pen in hand. He writes letters to family, essays that sharpen his thought, and drafts of stories that speak of sorrow and hope. His words begin to take shape, like stones laid for a path he does not yet fully see. The pen becomes his true scalpel, dissecting the sickness of society with more precision than any surgeon's hand. In Madrid, he also learns the art of balance. He moves between worlds, the disciplined halls of medicine, the fiery cafes of politics, the hushed sanctuaries of libraries. Each world feeds the other. The scientist in him studies the body, while the writer studies the wounds of a nation. The son of Calamba becomes a man who knows that healing cannot be confined to hospitals. It must reach the body of the people. The city itself sharpens him. He watches bullfights and feels both awe and unease at the spectacle of death. He walks through museums, lingering before canvases where heroes and martyrs are painted larger than life. He attends theatre, where stories of betrayal and triumph echo his own inner questions. Every experience deepens his sense that art and life are mirrors, and that both can awaken a people to courage. Rizal's friendships broaden his world. Spaniards who see him as an equal share their philosophies, while fellow Filipinos confide their longing for home. Among them he finds camaraderie, and sometimes rivalry, yet all sharpen him. They remind him that the struggle is not solitary. Even as one man's voice can pierce silence, it is the chorus of many that shifts the ground. And so, in Madrid, the awakening unfolds, not as a sudden thunderclap, but as dawn breaking slowly across the horizon. Rizal begins to understand that knowledge is not enough. It must be wielded. Compassion is not enough. It must be spoken. The world will not change by silence. Ideas, he realizes, are sparks, and sparks must be allowed to fall upon kindling if they are ever to become fire. In quiet hours, he writes lines that will later grow into something larger. He envisions stories where injustice is unmasked, where the voiceless find tongue. The seed of Noli me Tangere stirs faintly within him, though it will take more years and deeper struggle to bear fruit. But already, Madrid has done its work. It has turned a student into a thinker into a witness, and a witness into a voice. As seasons turn, Rizal's name begins to circulate softly in circles of reform. Not famous, not yet, but respected. His gentleness hides a steel resolve, and his words, even in casual conversation, carry weight. He does not shout, he does not rage. He speaks with calm precision, and in that calmness lies his power. For he has learned that the most enduring awakenings are not born of fury alone, but of clarity, of vision, of truth spoken in a steady tone. Thus Madrid, with all its contradictions, becomes his crucible. Here, Amid cobblestones and coffee cups, anatomy charts and library stacks, Jose Rizal awakens to his true calling. He is no longer only a student of medicine, he is becoming a surgeon of the soul, preparing to diagnose and reveal the hidden disease of colonial rule. And soon, with pen in hand, he will wield his first great incision, not upon flesh, but upon the silence of a nation, through the birth of a book that will cut deeper than any blade. In the hush of a foreign room, beneath the quiet glow of a lamp, Jose Rizal bends over a desk. The world outside may be filled with chatter, laughter, or footsteps. But in this small space there is only silence. The silence of creation, the silence before a storm. He dips his pen into ink, his hand steady, his heart restless. The page waits, pale and unmarked, as though it has long anticipated the weight it is about to carry. The story begins not with swords, nor with fire, but with memory. Rizal remembers his homeland, the long fields under the sun, the laughter of children running through bamboo groves, the hymns sung in small chapels, the shadows cast by friars' robes. He remembers injustice, the cruelty of those who wielded power behind sacred vestments, the humiliation of the Indio before the colonial judge, the sorrow of mothers whose sons were condemned without trial. These memories do not fade in distance, they sharpen, like blades honed in exile. From this well of memory, Noli Tangere rises. Page by page, Rizal shapes a world both familiar and fearless. He builds his Philippines anew, not as empire tells it, but as truth whispers it. Within the novel, voices long silenced are allowed to speak. The farmer, the student, the lover, the priest, all step forward, carrying the burdens of their time. Through their lives, the hidden wounds of the nation bleed into light. The characters are not mere inventions, they are mirrors. Ibarra, the idealist, carries fragments of Rizal himself, a man torn between hope and despair, between return and exile. Maria Clara embodies the innocence of a people, tender yet bound in chains not of her choosing. Padre Damaso and the friars embody corruption, the shadow cast when power forgets mercy. Each figure walks upon the page with the weight of a truth too dangerous to be spoken openly. Yet through fiction, truth finds its voice. The title itself, Noli Tangere, Touch Me Not, is both warning and revelation. It speaks of a wound too deep, too sacred to be handled lightly. Rizal borrows the phrase from the Gospel, yet he reimagines it as the cry of a nation. Do not touch me with lies. Do not touch me with cruelty. Do not touch me with chains. The wound is open, but in its pain lies the call to healing. Rizal writes not with anger's haste, but with sorrow's patience. His sentences are careful, luminous, layered with compassion even as they cut. He knows the risks. To name injustice is to invite the wrath of those who profit from silence. But he also knows that silence is a prison, and words are keys. With each chapter his resolve deepens. This is not a book for leisure, it is a book for awakening. When the novel is complete, it weighs more than paper and ink. It is a vessel of memory, a lantern of truth, a dagger wrapped in the softness of story. Rizal holds it in his hands and feels its pulse. He has given form to what millions feel but cannot say. He has put into words the unspoken H of his people. The book finds its way into the world. At first quietly, passed hand to hand, read in secret. Filipinos read it by candlelight, their lips trembling at the recognition of themselves in its pages. Some weep, others burn with anger. For the first time, the hidden sorrows of their daily lives are not just personal burdens, but part of a larger story. Their wounds are named, and in naming, they are no longer alone. But empire does not sleep. The friars, upon hearing whispers of the book, are furious. They denounce it from the pulpit, branding it dangerous, blasphemous, an enemy of faith. They fear its power, for it does not strike with steel but with something more enduring, truth. To them, Rizal has committed a crime worse than rebellion. He has made people see. And yet, the book cannot be contained. It travels across oceans, smuggled in satchels, hidden beneath clothes. Wherever it goes, it unsettles, awakens, provokes. It is both mirror and dagger, reflecting injustice, piercing complacency. In its presence, silence is no longer possible. For Rizal, the response is both burden and vindication. He knows he has placed himself in danger. The eyes of empire now follow him more closely. The shadow of persecution lengthens across his path. But he also knows he has fulfilled a duty. A voice once hushed by colonial classrooms now echoes in plazas, in secret gatherings, in the quiet corners of Filipino homes. He has shown that the pen, in its quiet persistence, can be sharper than any sword. In his solitude, he reflects on what he has done. He is not a warrior, not a general, not a leader of armies. He is only a writer, a doctor, a dreamer. Yet through his words, he has drawn a line in the sand. He has proven that resistance can wear the face of compassion, that revolution can begin with ink. The Philippines, once seen only as colony, now begins to see itself as a nation. The lamp at his desk burns low, its flame flickering against the night. Rizal sits with weariness in his bones, but also a quiet fire in his spirit. He knows the road ahead will be long, marked with exile, trial, perhaps even death. But tonight, he allows himself a moment of stillness. He has given his people a voice. He has placed a seed in the soil of history. What grows from it will no longer be his alone. And already, beyond the walls of his room, whispers stir. Whispers that will swell into flames, for once a light has been kindled. It can no longer be hidden. The book leaves his hands, and in leaving, it no longer belongs to him. Noli he re-travels quietly across oceans and into the archipelago of his birth, folded into trunks, carried in parcels, hidden beneath clothing. It slips past the watchful eyes of empire, arriving in Manila like contraband light. A novel, bound in simple covers, but carrying within it the weight of centuries of silence. In the beginning, it is read in whispers. In dimly lit houses, families gather around a single copy, eyes moving carefully across the pages, hearts racing with recognition. They see themselves, at last, mirrored in its lines. The poor farmer recognizes his toil in the character of Caesar, whose madness is born of hunger and loss. The student feels his own longing echoed in Ibarra's dream of education and reform. The mother weeps at Maria Clara's captivity, a sorrow too familiar to dismiss as fiction. The novel becomes a mirror, reflecting wounds that had long been hidden beneath the skin of daily life. For many, the reading is painful. Yet in pain, there is awakening. What once seemed isolated, one man's injustice, one family's sorrow, is revealed as shared, as collective, as national. In candlelit rooms, tears fall not only for fictional lives, but for real ones, for neighbours, for kin, for themselves. Hope stirs, fragile but undeniable. If their suffering can be named, perhaps it can also be healed. But if the people recognize themselves in the pages, so too do those in power. The friars, upon hearing of the book, respond not with reflection but with fury. From pulpits they denounce Rizal as heretic, liar, enemy of the church. Sermons thunder against him, declaring that his pen drips with poison. Copies of the book are seized, condemned, in some cases burned. To touch it is to risk suspicion, to own it is to invite peril. And yet, the more the rulers curse it, the more the people seek it. Prohibition becomes advertisement, denunciation becomes proof of its power. Like fire smothered by hands, the novel's flame only grows hotter beneath the pressure. The authorities, without meaning to, confirm what Rizal has written, that they fear the truth. Rizal, from afar, watches the storm gather around his work. Letters reach him carrying both praise and warning. Friends urge caution, knowing that his name now circulates not only among reformists but also within the ledgers of spies. Yet Rizal remains calm, almost serene. He did not write to be safe, he wrote to be true. The danger is real, but so is the duty. In the Philippines, Noli he re-spreads like rumor, like song. Young men of the Katipunan read passages in secret, their voices hushed but burning. Teachers whisper its lessons to students, weaving fiction into memory. Even those who cannot read hear its stories retold, reshaped, passed from mouth to mouth. The book becomes more than a novel. It becomes a vessel of imagination, a seed of revolution. The empire senses this shifting ground. The air grows taut with suspicion, arrests multiply, and with them, the fear of speaking too openly. But silence no longer holds as it once did, for once the truth is glimpsed, it cannot be unseen. Once the flame is lit, the darkness itself feels thinner, more fragile. Rizal reflects on this transformation with a mix of wonder and sorrow. He knows he has kindled something larger than himself, something he cannot control. He thinks of his family in Calamba, of his mother's patient eyes, of his father's quiet strength. He worries for them, for the shadow his book may cast upon their lives. Yet he also knows that history does not unfold without cost. A nation cannot awaken without stirring fear in those who have built their power upon its slumber. Still, he does not rejoice in the turmoil. Rizal is not a man who delights in conflict. His aim was never vengeance, never blood, but light. The novel was meant to open eyes, not to draw swords. Yet, he begins to see what perhaps he has always known, that once truth is spoken, it no longer belongs to the one who spoke it. It belongs to the people, and the people will decide what to do with it. The friars continue their sermons, louder now, almost frantic. They warn that the book will corrupt souls, destroy faith, tear apart the fragile order of the colony. But their very vehemence betrays their fear. They know that ideas, once released, cannot be chained again. For centuries, they held the power to define reality. Now, Rizal's words have offered an alternative vision. The people have seen a different mirror, one that shows their suffering not as fate, but as injustice. And so, in quiet corners, a new courage takes root. It is not yet open rebellion, not yet the roar of revolution. It is smaller, subtler, like embers glowing beneath ash, waiting for wind. A farmer dares to speak a question he once kept to himself. A student dreams not of obedience, but of change. A mother teaches her child not just to pray, but to hope. The novel has altered the imagination of a people, and imagination, once awakened, is unstoppable. Rizal himself feels the weight of this realization. He has become more than a writer, he has become a symbol. And symbols, once forged, cannot return to anonymity. He knows the empire will follow him, perhaps imprison him, perhaps worse. But in his quiet heart, he also knows that the risk is worth it. Better to kindle one flame than to leave a nation in perpetual night. The book's journey is far from over. Its echoes will carry into homes, into classrooms, into the hearts of those who will one day raise arms. Rizal does not know this fully yet, but history already leans toward it. The line between reform and revolution is growing thinner, and the pages of his novel have become the bridge. And in the glow of this fragile fire, Rizal begins to understand that his words have escaped him, that they now live in the hearts of others, hearts that will one day demand not only books, but action. The sea is wide between Manila and the northern shore of Mindanao, and upon that distance, Jose Rizal is cast away like a solitary star. It is July of 1892 when he arrives in Dapitan, a small, quiet town wrapped in forests and shoreline. For the empire, it is punishment, a silencing. For Rizal, it becomes a different kind of crucible. Here, the restless wanderer, the student of Europe, the novelist who set fire to a nation's conscience, must learn the stillness of exile. The town receives him with curiosity. He is no ordinary prisoner. He is a doctor, a scholar, a man whose name carries whispers of both reverence and suspicion. Spanish soldiers watch him, yet the townspeople gravitate toward him. Slowly, like a seed learning the patience of the soil, Rizal sinks roots into Dapitan's earth. He rents a small house by the sea, surrounded by coconut groves and the gentle hum of waves. It is here he begins to live a different rhythm, one measured not by politics or trial, but by the rising of the sun, the tending of plants, the curing of fevers. Exile, instead of closing him, unfolds him in unexpected directions. The doctor in him awakens first. Patients come from villages near and far. Blind eyes seeking sight, broken bodies seeking relief. With steady hands and gentle eyes, Rizal treats them all. He asks for no payment, except sometimes in kind. A chicken, a basket of rice, a smile of gratitude. In his small house, suffering is met not with indifference but with care. He also teaches. Children of Dapitan gather under the trees, listening as Rizal opens before them the worlds of science, geography, languages, and art. He draws maps on the ground, traces constellations in the sky, shows them how the veins of a leaf echo the veins of the human hand. To learn with him is to feel the world breathing, vast, intricate, alive. He gives them tools not only of knowledge but of dignity, the sense that their minds, too, are capable of grasping the infinite. He builds as well. With the villagers' help, he designs a water system to bring fresh spring water into town. He plants fruit trees, tends a garden of medicinal herbs, even ventures into business, investing in a backer to give the people livelihood. His exile becomes a workshop of hope, a quiet revolution, not of weapons but of everyday acts that make life brighter. And yet, beneath this rhythm of healing and building, there is solitude. Night after night, he listens to the sea and feels the ache of distance. His heart, once alive in the bustling streets of Madrid and Paris, is now tempered by silence. He writes letters, he sketches, he dreams. But there is a void that neither science nor service can fully fill. It is in this void that she enters. Her name is Josephine Bracken, a young woman with Irish blood, raised in Hong Kong, brought to Dapitan by fate. She arrives with her adoptive father, who seeks Rizal's medical skill for his failing eyesight. Josephine is different from the women Rizal has known. She is lively, spirited, with a warmth that softens his solitude. Their meeting feels less like chance than like a long-awaited turning of the page. In her presence, Rizal rediscovers the tender pulse of love. They walk by the shore, they share conversations under the canopy of stars. They find in each other a companionship that exile could not deny. Josephine is not only a companion, but a mirror of his longing. She too is caught between worlds, never fully belonging, always searching. In her, Rizal finds both gentleness and strength. Their love, however, is shadowed by circumstance. The church refuses them a formal marriage unless Rizal recounts his writings. He will not. Instead, they live as husband and wife in their own quiet covenant, building a life together despite the watchful eyes of empire. Love, for them, becomes both defiance and solace. In their small home, they plant together, read together, dream together. For a brief moment, Rizal allows himself the tenderness of domestic life, the possibility of a family, the hope of raising children in freedom. When Josephine later suffers the loss of their first child, grief washes over them like a storm. Yet even in sorrow, their bond deepens. Exile, which sought to isolate, instead teaches him that even in chains, the heart can find its own liberty. The years in Dapitan stretch quietly, marked by seasons of rain and sun. Rizal grows more deeply woven into the fabric of the town. He is no longer only a prisoner of empire, but a teacher, a healer, a lover, a friend. Dapitan, once meant to be his cage, becomes a testament to resilience, proof that the human spirit can carve meaning even in captivity. Yet beyond the horizon, history stirs. In Manila and in the countryside, his novels circulate, whispered from hand to hand. The Katipunan grows, fanned by the fire of words he once poured onto the page. While he plants trees in Dapitan, others plant seeds of revolution. The tide of change rises, and though Rizal does not wield a sword, he feels its inevitability. When emissaries of the Katipunan seek his leadership, he hesitates. His heart is torn between his vision of peaceful reform and the rising drumbeat of war. He knows the price of violence. He also knows the cost of silence. In these tensions, his time in Dapitan becomes more fragile, more fleeting. Still, for a season, love shelters him. Josephine's laughter, the children's lessons, the blooming of orchards, all become fragments of a quiet paradise, a paradise destined to be broken. For exile cannot last forever. In 1896, events pull him away from Dapitan. His offer to serve as a doctor in Cuba is accepted by the Spanish government, and he prepares to leave with Josephine by his side. But fate, once again, is sharper than intention. Arrest, trial, and destiny await him in Manila. The love that began in the hush of exile will soon be tested by the roar of empire. Yet Dapitan remains. A chapter of stillness, of healing, of love that dared to blossom against the weight of chains. Here, Rizal proved that even in the margins of history, one can live fully, tenderly, bravely. And so, in the quiet town of Dapitan, Rizal tastes both the sweetness of love and the ache of separation. Soon, his pen will burn again, birthing Il Filibusterismo, a darker vision, a fire within. The ink darkens, the hand trembles slightly, and in the stillness of his exile, Rizal turns to his second novel. Noli he had been the tender mirror, a reflection of wounds, of quiet suffering, of lives broken beneath empire's weight. It had shown the hidden cancers of the land with the soft sorrow of a physician. But now, the physician's heart hardens. The mirror shatters, and in its place he lifts a torch. The year is 1891 when El Filibusterismo appears, published in Ghent after many struggles with money and censorship. It is a leaner book, stripped of ornament, its tone less forgiving, its purpose sharper. If the first novel asked his countrymen to look inward with compassion, the second demands they look outward with fire. Where Noli gave them a bara, the idealist, the reformer who believed in change through reason and kindness, the ill-feely offers Seaman, the jeweler with a shadowed past, whose heart beats with vengeance. Seaman is a bara transformed by grief, by betrayal, by exile. He returns to the Philippines not with the hope of persuasion, but with the plan of destruction. His jewels are not ornaments of beauty, but seeds of conspiracy. Through this figure, Rizal pours the darker waters of his own reflection. He has seen how empire mocks petitions, how reform falls against walls of stone. He has felt the futility of patience when every day the people remain in chains. In Seaman, he lets that bitterness live, the temptation of the sword, the hunger for justice by fire. But here lies Rizal's genius. He does not glorify Seaman. He does not hand the reader a hero to follow blindly into flames. Instead, he presents a man consumed, devoured by his own thirst for vengeance. Seaman's plans unravel, his revolution collapses, and in the end he dies a tragic figure, undone by his own rage. The message is clear: violence, though tempting, brings its own ruin. It may destroy the oppressor, but it also devours the soul of the oppressed. In this dark parable, Rizal warns his people of the price of revolution, even as he acknowledges its inevitability. The pages of El Fili are heavy with gloom. Gone is the playful satire of Noli, replaced by sharp bitterness. The characters live in shadows, their hopes brittle, their endings bleak. Where Noli left room for tender love stories, El Fili offers broken romances, abandoned dreams, lives corroded by oppression. It is not a book meant to comfort. It is a book meant to trouble, to unsettle, to shake awake the spirit. Yet even in its darkness, there is brilliance. The novel slices like a blade through layers of fear and silence. Readers find themselves caught between dread and admiration, between sorrow and awakening. For the poor and oppressed, it is a vindication. Someone has voiced what they dare not speak. For the rulers, it is a threat, a storm cloud gathering at the edge of the horizon. The Spanish authorities, already wary after Noli, see in Il Fili a greater danger. Here is not only critique, but the suggestion of uprising, the whisper of flames beneath the soil. The friars condemn the book as poison. The government fears it as a spark. Yet among the young, among those who gather in secret societies and dream of liberty, the book circulates with reverence. Students in Manila whisper passages by lamplight. Peasants hear its stories retold in the fields. In it, they recognize not only their sufferings but also their hidden anger. Rizal has taken the private H of a people and written it into a public fire. And yet, behind the novel's urgency, Rizal remains himself, a man torn between paths. His heart resists violence, his mind fears the abyss of bloodshed, yet his pen cannot deny the rising tide. By writing Seaman's failure, he tries to hold a mirror to both sides, to warn the rulers of what their cruelty will summon, and to caution his people of what vengeance will cost. It is a delicate balance, a dance between warning and prophecy. To the empire, he says reform before it is too late. To his countrymen, he says, beware, for the sword may wound the hand that wields it. The weight of El Fili presses on Rizal himself. He knows the risks. Already, he has been exiled, watched, threatened. Yet he does not hide the book. He sends it into the world as one might release a bird of fire, uncertain where it will land, certain only that it cannot be caged. The reaction is swift. Admiration from his people, condemnation from the friars, surveillance from the state. With Rizal moves from being a troublesome writer to a dangerous one. He becomes not only the conscience of a people, but also the spectre of rebellion. And still he remains calm. In his letters, he insists he does not seek violence, that his hope is still for peaceful reform. But the truth is heavier. He knows the words once written cannot be unwritten. He knows that once fire is lit, it grows beyond the hand that sparked it. In the dim light of his exile in Dapitan, as he walks the shoreline with Josephine, or teaches children beneath the trees, the echo of seamen lingers. The novel is no longer just pages in print. It has become a shadow trailing him, a prophecy tied to his name. He carries it like a second heartbeat, one that grows louder with every whisper of revolution in the land. History is moving. The people are stirring. The empire is watching. And in the middle of it all, Rizal stands, gentle yet unyielding, torn yet steadfast, a man whose words now blaze brighter than any sword. In the wake of Filibusterismo, silence is no longer possible. The empire's chains tighten, the people's whispers grow louder, and Rizal himself feels the weight of a destiny pressing near. Soon, those chains will bind him more harshly, and the story will move into trial, words, and judgment. The sea that once carried Rizal toward wider horizons now turns against him. From the quiet refuge of Dapitan, he is summoned back into the empire's grasp, drawn into the tightening net of suspicion and fear. What began as exile will become imprisonment, and what began as watchful silence will now become chains. In the summer of 1896, Rizal boards a ship bound not for freedom, but for another chapter of confinement. He has volunteered to serve as a doctor in Cuba, where an epidemic ravages the Spanish forces. His request is accepted, and for a moment, there is hope that service might open a path away from suspicion. But the air is heavy with unrest. The Katipunan stirs in secret, their oaths echoing the pages of his books, and the empire trembles at the thought that his words are now flesh in the form of revolution. The voyage is interrupted. Orders are given. Rizal is arrested, accused once again of sedition, rebellion, and conspiracy. He, who has never wielded a sword, who has never marched with rebels, is bound as though he were the architect of war. It is not his hands they fear, but his pen, his voice, his quiet influence that moves unseen. Chains are clasped upon him, though they are not always of iron. The true chains are invisible suspicion, distortion, fear woven into the empire's gaze. Yet even as they weigh upon him, Rizal remains serene. His spirit does not rattle with the iron at his wrists. His eyes do not dim beneath the shadow of accusation. To those who watch him, it seems as though he has already walked beyond fear into a calm surrender. He is transported back to Manila, and there the machinery of empire grinds into motion. Soldiers line the docks. Officials whisper his name with caution, some with contempt, others with a hidden reverence. To the friars, he is a danger greater than any sword-bearing rebel, for his power lies not in armies but in conscience. To the young who whisper in alleyways, he is already a martyr in waiting, though he still breathes. Inside the prison walls of Fort Santiago, stone presses cold against his body. The cell is narrow, dim, unyielding. But within its silence, Rizal writes letters, reflects, prays. His solitude is not barren. It is filled with memory. The warmth of his mother's teaching, the laughter of his siblings, the faces of patients in Dapitan whose pain He once eased the light of Josephine's eyes as they walked by the sea. The chains attempt to define him, but he knows their limits. Steel can confine flesh, but not thought. Silence can bury sound, but not truth. He begins to understand that his greatest weapon is not resistance, but composure, not defiance, but dignity. In remaining calm, he unmasks the empire's fear. The trial approaches, and with it, the spectacle of power. Rizal is paraded not as a criminal proven guilty, but as an example to be made, a warning to those who might follow his path. The charges are grave sedition, rebellion, conspiracy with the Katipunan. Yet even his accusers know that he has not raised a hand in violence. Still, in their eyes, the flame of his words is equal to a sword, and perhaps sharper. Outside the walls, the city stirs. Manila lives in whispers, rumors of uprising, fears of reprisal, prayers for deliverance. The people watch and wait, their hearts entangled with his fate. Every door closed in secrecy hides a longing. Every conversation beneath the night sky circles back to his name. His chains have not silenced him, they have amplified him. Within the courtroom, Rizal stands as though untouched by the storm around him. His voice remains steady, his gaze unbroken. He answers charges not with fury, but with clarity, not with desperation, but with measured calm. It is as if he understands that history, not the judges, is the true audience of his defense. The empire may render its verdict, but the world will remember his composure. For Rizal, imprisonment is not defeat, it is transformation. Where once he moved through libraries and classrooms, where once he crossed oceans to learn and to speak, now he moves inward, deeper into the quiet strength of the soul. He accepts that his fate may already be sealed, yet he does not surrender to bitterness. Instead, he reflects, he prays, he writes, each act a defiance of despair. The chains grow heavier as the days pass, yet those who glimpse him see no collapse. Guards note his politeness, his composure, his quiet dignity. He carries his captivity like a cloak, neither flaunting nor resenting it, simply bearing it as one bears the inevitability of nightfall. He understands that night always deepens before dawn. The empire believes it has bound him, but in truth, he is freer than those who accuse him. For they are caught in their own chains. The chains of fear, of greed, of power clutched too tightly. His silence reveals their weakness. His calm exposes their desperation. His chains, instead of crushing him, become his crown. In the city outside, the Katipunan grows restless. News of his arrest fuels the fire rather than quenches it. Bonifacio and others whisper that if Rizal falls, the people must rise. Ironically, the very act of silencing him gives his words a sharper echo. His chains become not a sign of his weakness, but a symbol of their strength. As Rizal waits in his prison cell, he contemplates what lies ahead. He does not know if he will live or die, but he senses that his fate is already entwined with the destiny of his nation. He feels the weight of history pressing upon his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a final calling. The chains remain. They do not loosen. Yet he walks within them with grace, as though each step were already free. And in the silence of his imprisonment, he discovers the paradox that the body may be bound, but the soul may yet fly. And so Rizal endures, calm amid the tightening grip of empire, a man bound yet unbroken. Soon, the trial will begin, a theatre of words where truth itself will be placed on trial. The night in Manila grows heavy with heat, yet it is not only the climate that thickens the air. Something invisible begins to stir. a pulse beneath the surface of daily life, as if the very soil of the islands remembers its ancient dignity and aches for release. By day, the plazas and markets bustle under the shadow of the cross and the sword. By night, however, small rooms glow faintly with candlelight where men and women huddle in secrecy, whispering of freedom. In those whispers, one name is repeated, almost like a prayer: Rizal. Though he sits in prison, bound by the will of an empire, his words escape the bars, flowing like water that cannot be dammed. The Noli Tangere and the Filibusterismo pass from hand to hand, their pages worn, their ink sometimes smudged by sweat, sometimes by tears. In them, the people see themselves reflected, their sufferings named, their hopes ignited. Andres Bonifacio, son of a struggling family, reads the books with trembling hands. They are not mere stories to him, but revelations. Each page feels like a stone pried loose from the foundations of fear. He carries Rizal's vision, not in silence but in action. With his friend Emilio Jacinto, he forms a secret society, the Kartas to Osan, Kogalangalangang, Katipunan Nang Maga, Onak Nang Bayan, the supreme and most honourable society of the sons of the nation. The Katipunan meets in the shadows, in the cramped rooms of Tondo and the outskirts of Manila. A candle flickers, a dagger gleams, oaths are sworn over drops of blood. But even in this fever of revolution, Rizal's presence hovers. Bonifacio carries his portrait, a solemn reminder that the struggle is not for vengeance, but for dignity. In the fragile silence after each oath, Rizal's words echo, "The youth is the hope of the nation." Across the islands, young men and women who have never seen him in person feel as if he is speaking directly to them. His image, sometimes crudely drawn, sometimes carefully painted, hangs in meeting rooms and humble homes. To them, Rizal is more than a man. He is a mirror of what they could be, a voice reminding them that slavery of the spirit is the cruelest bondage of all. Yet Rizal himself, in his cell, does not dream of bloodshed. He writes, he reflects, he remains calm, even while the empire grows restless around him. Perhaps he senses the storm gathering in his name. Perhaps he knows that revolutions, once kindled, no longer belong to those who light the first spark. The Katipunan, though inspired by Rizal, walks a different path, one of fire and blade. Where he hoped for peaceful awakening, they prepare for uprising. But both paths emerge from the same wound, the same longing. It is as if Rizal has sown seeds into the earth of the nation, and others now water them with their fervour. Imagine a gathering in the dim light of a bamboo hut. The men sit cross-legged on mats, their faces lit by a single oil lamp. Bonifacio reads aloud passages from Rizal's works, his voice trembling, sometimes breaking with emotion. Around him, the listeners nod, fists tightening in resolve. The room feels small, but in their minds the horizon expands, stretching beyond chains, beyond poverty, beyond empire. In prison, Rizal writes letters to his family, essays of reflection, even poetry. He does not know that, outside, men are preparing for armed revolt under his name. Yet the irony is deep. While he counsels patience and reason, the impatience he has awakened surges like a river in flood. It cannot be contained. Still, Rizal's influence acts as a compass. Jacinto, the young brains of the Katipunan, pens manifestos that echo Rizal's themes. Reason, justice, moral strength. Even in revolution, Rizal's voice shapes the tone, urging that liberty must not become cruelty, that freedom must not be purchased with the same injustices it seeks to overthrow. The empire senses this stirring. Spies whisper, friars frown, and officials grow wary. The books are banned, the very act of reading them considered dangerous. But danger only deepens desire. Like contraband relics, Rizal's works travel wrapped in cloth, hidden in baskets, tucked beneath clothes. To possess his book is to hold a fragment of light. And so, even in chains, Rizal is free. His words walk where he cannot walk. His name is spoken where his voice cannot reach. His very silence becomes louder than a shout. The nation begins to awaken. From Ilocos in the north to Mindanao in the south, the murmur of change spreads. It is a restless hum, like the ocean before a storm. In marketplaces, in cockpits, in churches, in schools, the talk cannot be stilled. A people long bowed begins to lift its gaze. Perhaps Rizal himself could not have foreseen how deeply he would live in the minds of his countrymen. Perhaps he dreamed only of writing, of teaching, of healing. Yet history chooses its vessels in ways no man can fully command. In the quiet of his confinement, Rizal becomes paradoxically more powerful. Because he cannot act, others must. Because he cannot move, others march. The candlelight of the Katipunan burns hotter, brighter. And while Rizal remains in prison, the flame of his influence escapes into the world unbound, untouchable. The colonizers hold his body but not his soul. For in the stillness of his chains, a nation stirs awake. Even as Rizal waits behind bars, the air outside thickens with unrest like thunderclouds before rain. Soon, his fate and the fate of the nation will collide, and the silence will break. The hall is heavy with silence. Wooden benches groan under the weight of soldiers, clerks, and priests, their eyes fixed upon the man who enters with a quiet step. Chains are absent, for the empire knows chains would not make him appear smaller. He walks without fear, and already the trial feels less like a judgment of one man and more like a judgment upon the empire itself. Jose Rizal takes his seat. Before him, Spanish judges in uniformed sternness prepare their papers. Their faces are masks of authority, but even masks tremble when the world beneath them shifts. For beneath this chamber of law, beneath the ritual of accusation and defense, lies something larger, the future of a nation pressed into the fragile frame of a single man. The charges are read: sedition, rebellion, conspiracy, words heavy as iron, sharpened to pierce not only his body but his memory. Yet Rizal listens with the patience of a physician diagnosing a fever he already understands. He knows the sickness of empire, fear dressed as law. He knows the fever of tyranny, the desperate clinging to power when its end is near. The courtroom is crowded with eyes that do not meet his directly. Clerks write without thought. Soldiers stand with rigid discipline. Priests whisper in Latin under their breath. But somewhere beyond the walls, Manila breathes. Men and women wait in hushed alleys, anxious for news, longing for hope. The trial is not simply his. It belongs to them. Every word spoken here is carried by the wind to the restless heart of a people. Rizal is asked to speak. His voice, calm and even, carries without strain. He does not defend himself with anger. He does not lash out with bitterness. Instead, he answers with clarity, with a precision honed by years of study, as if this trial were yet another examination, though one written not on paper, but upon history itself. He denies involvement in the rebellion. He insists he never called for arms, that he never summoned men to shed blood. He recalls that his pen was his only weapon, his books his only field of battle. His words are firm, not defensive but luminous, like a lantern placed in the dark corners of the room. For the judges, this light is unbearable. They seek not truth, but confirmation of guilt. The trial, staged and rehearsed, is meant to end with only one verdict. Yet the accused does not play his role as they expect. He speaks not as a man pleading for life, but as one who has already surrendered his body to fate and has chosen only to preserve his integrity. Had I wished revolution, he says softly, I would not have chosen the pen. The words ripple through the chamber. A few soldiers lower their eyes. A clerk pauses his writing. Even the air seems to draw back, waiting. For in that single sentence lies an unanswerable truth. Rebellion is not his crime, but the empire's fear. His accusers bring witnesses. Some claim they read his books and saw rebellion in their pages. Others insist that his name was whispered among the Katipunan, that his image was carried like a hidden standard. Yet what these testimonies reveal is not Rizal's guilt, but his power. The way ideas slip through walls, the way words root themselves in soil no empire can burn. Rizal listens. His face reveals no anger, no panic. Instead, there is a strange serenity, as though he has long foreseen this performance. For he knows the stage was set the moment he chose to write truth into ink, the moment he refused to bend his spirit to silence. The judges deliberate, though all know the outcome. The verdict was inscribed before the trial began, carved into the machinery of empire. Yet still the ritual continues, as if by repeating the forms of justice, they could mask the absence of justice itself. Rizal rises to speak once more. His final defense is brief, not to persuade the judges, for persuasion is impossible, but to leave behind a testimony for history. He affirms his love for his country, his commitment to reform through peaceful means, his rejection of violence. He confesses no guilt, but admits a single devotion, that the Filipino people deserve dignity, education, and liberty. The courtroom, for a moment, grows still. Even those hardened by power feel the weight of sincerity when it is spoken without fear. A candle may flicker, but when it burns in the open, no wind can disguise its flame. The sentence is read, death by firing squad. The words echo against the walls, hollow as the beating of a drum. Yet if the empire believes this declaration marks their triumph, they are mistaken. For in the quiet gaze of the condemned, in the unshaken calm of his posture, the true judgment is reversed. It is not Rizal who stands condemned by history, but the empire itself. As he is led from the courtroom, the spectators murmur. Some avoid his eyes, ashamed. Others watch him with reverence, knowing they have witnessed not merely a trial, but the forging of a symbol. Outside, Manila waits in suspense. When word spreads, grief and awe will mingle like smoke, filling every corner of the colony. The trial ends, but the real trial begins, not of Rizal, but of Spain. For history does not forget the calm dignity of a man standing before power and refusing to tremble. History remembers how silence can thunder louder than a verdict, how a voice steady in the face of death can break empires more surely than armies. Rizal returns to his cell, where the night folds around him. He sits at the wooden table, the echo of the trial still lingering in the air. He knows the script is written, the last act already prepared. Yet even here, in the solitude of prison, his thoughts do not dwell on fear but on words. Words he must yet write, words that will outlast the rifles. For if the empire has pronounced its sentence, Rizal has prepared his own reply, not in the courtroom, but in the silence of the night to come. His trial of words is not finished, it is only shifting to a deeper register, a final testament composed in ink, in love, in farewell. And so the trial closes, but the story opens into a new chapter. A chapter not of accusation, but of letters written by a hand already touched by eternity. The gavel falls, but his voice does not fade. From the stillness of the courtroom, his words walk into the prison night. Toward the letters he must yet write, the last love he must yet confess, and there the ink begins to flow. The cell is dim, the walls breathing with the damp of December. A single lamp burns faintly, casting shadows that seem to listen as he bends over the table. Outside, the fortress of Manila lies cloaked in silence, but within these walls, a hand moves steadily across paper, each stroke of ink carrying the weight of an ending. Jose Rizal writes, "It is not his first letter, nor the longest, but it is perhaps the most tender. He begins not with politics, not with accusations or defense, but with love. To Josephine Bracken, the woman who entered his life in exile and became his companion in sorrow and hope, he writes with the intimacy of one who knows time has run short. My dear Josephine," the words might say, though their exact lines are less important than their pulse. He recalls their days in Dapitan, the garden they planted, the school he built, the evenings by the shore when the sea seemed to promise a gentler world. He does not write of regrets, only of gratitude. Love, to him, has always been a gift, not a possession. And so even as the empire takes his life, he leaves her with something untouchable, the assurance that she was the harbour of his final years. His pen lifts, then lowers again, a pause, a breath, for letters written in the shadow of death are not written quickly. Each line must be carried carefully like water drawn from a well, fragile and irreplaceable. He writes, too, to his family, to his mother, Theodora, who first placed a book in his small hands, who taught him to pray, who endured the empire's cruelty with unshaken dignity, to his father, who taught him the honesty of labour, to his siblings, each one of them carrying a part of his soul. His words are tender but not indulgent. He does not ask them to mourn endlessly. He asks them instead to continue, to live, to hope, to endure. Forgiveness lingers in his sentences. He does not wish bitterness to poison the hearts of those he loves. The Spaniards may take his life, but he refuses them his anger. For anger dies with the body, but forgiveness plants seeds in the soil of the future. He writes not to curse, but to bless. His letters are not walls of defense. They are doors opening into a life beyond his own. The night deepens. Guards pass by his cell, their boots echoing like distant drums. Yet even they seem to step softer, as if reluctant to disturb the quiet act unfolding within. They know what he writes will outlast them. Empires fall, uniforms fade, but words on paper remain, carried by unseen currents into the hands of generations unborn. Rizal pauses again, his eyes close for a moment, not in despair, but in reflection. Memory walks beside him, the boy at Calamba gazing at the lake, the student in Madrid wrestling with ideas of liberty, the exile in Dapitan building classrooms from bamboo and stone. All these selves converge into the man now bending over a final letter. It is as if his whole life has been leading to this act, the act of leaving behind words that no rifle can erase. In his letter to Josephine, he speaks of faith, not a naive faith that denies pain, but a faith that recognizes it and still believes love is stronger. He tells her not to weep endlessly, for love is not measured by duration, but by depth. Their time together, brief though it was, has been enough to light the last corridor of his life. To his family, he writes of courage. He urges them not to sink into despair, but to remember that his death is not the extinguishing of a flame, but its passing into other candles. The empire may silence his voice, but it cannot silence the echo it awakens in the hearts of his people. He asks them to be strong, to endure, to hold on to the dignity that no power can steal. And woven through every line is a quiet rhythm of farewell. Farewell not as final absence, but as gentle release. He is not abandoning them, he is entrusting them to the future he has dreamed. His words are not endings, but beginnings written in the ink of sacrifice. The letters grow longer as the night moves forward. His handwriting, though steady, betrays the gravity of the hour. Perhaps he senses that these letters will not remain in private hands alone, that they will be copied, remembered, spoken aloud in plazas and whispered in homes. He writes not only to his beloved, not only to his family, but to a nation that will one day read these words and understand that love can be stronger than fear, and forgiveness fiercer than hate. At times, his sentences fall into prayer, not the loud, pleading prayers of desperation, but the soft murmur of one who speaks with eternity. He entrusts himself to God. He entrusts his nation to God. He entrusts even his enemies to God. For the man who once dissected bodies in the pursuit of medicine now dissects the greater wound of humanity and finds the only balm is grace. The ink dries slowly, the lamp flickers, the sound of pen upon paper is the only heartbeat of the room, and when at last he lays the pen aside, the silence deepens, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. These letters will be delivered. Some will be hidden for years, carried in secrecy, preserved like relics. Others will be read in public, their words trembling in the voices of the people. All will endure. For these are not merely letters. They are love made eternal, farewell made living, ink turned into blood that does not fade. And so, on the eve of his execution, Rizal leaves behind not wealth, not monuments, not armies, but words. Words to comfort, to guide, to forgive. Words that outlast the gunfire awaiting him at dawn. He has written his final embraces upon paper. He has folded his heart into letters, sealed them with silence, entrusted them to time. And in doing so, he ensures that even as his body falls, his love will rise. The letters rest upon the table, their ink still glistening in the lamplight. Tomorrow, rifles will speak. But tonight, only the pen has the final word, and in the hush of that ink, another poem begins to stir. The night is still. Outside, the city sleeps under the weight of December's sky, but within the prison walls of Fort Santiago, a lamp glows faintly, throwing soft halos against stone. The air is heavy, yet within his cell, Jose Rizal bends quietly over a small sheet of paper. He is not hurried. His hand moves with grace, as though each word were a prayer. This will be his final gift, his last dialogue with his country, his ultimate act of resistance and love. He writes a poem. It begins not in bitterness, not in cries of anger, but in the voice of a man who accepts death with open hands. To many, execution would mean silence. To Rizal, it is a chance to let his soul speak more clearly than ever before. His pen is steady. His thoughts are lucid. In this hour, fear has no place, only light remains. He writes of his homeland, the beloved Philippines, not as a territory chained by empire, but as a mother, a beloved, a garden whose soil is watered by sacrifice. He offers his life not as loss, but as nourishment. If blood must fall, let it fall as dew, giving new strength to the earth from which freedom will one day rise. The words come to him as if carried on a wind greater than himself. He writes of dawn, of peace, of eternal rest. His death is not a prison's end, but a threshold. He sees beyond the rifles, beyond the blindfold he will refuse, beyond the mourning that will claim his body. What he sees is a nation awakening, a people stepping slowly, painfully, but surely toward liberty. Each stanza breathes with serenity. There is no hatred toward Spain, no venom in his lines. Instead, there is compassion, forgiveness, and hope. He knows the cycle of violence tempts men to repeat the cruelties they suffer, but he does not want his countrymen to inherit bitterness. He wants them to inherit vision, a vision where love of country does not mean hatred of others, but a commitment to dignity, justice, and life. He writes of those who will remain. He imagines the farmer tilling his land, the mother cradling her child, the student opening a book, the soldier marching into uncertain days. He leaves them his blessing, whispering across time that his sacrifice is not for mourning alone, but for courage. He asks them to think of him not as a martyr trapped in sorrow, but as a companion walking beside them in every act of hope. The poem moves gently between farewell and promise. It is a surrender, for he knows he cannot escape what dawn will bring. But it is also triumph, for he knows no bullet can reach the spirit of a word once spoken, a vision once given. The empire can command his death, but it cannot erase his voice. With each line, Rizal plants seeds, words that will bloom long after the soil has covered him. He writes, too, of the night sky. He imagines his soul joining the light of stars, watching over the land he loves. He imagines the breeze that touches the rice fields, the waves that brush the shores, the moonlight that falls upon Manila's streets, all carrying a trace of his spirit. He does not see himself ending. He sees himself dispersed, becoming part of the very elements of the country he serves. The poem is long, yet it is written with an ease that belies the gravity of the moment. His hand does not tremble. His lines do not wander. There is a clarity born of finality, the knowledge that no other words will come after, that this page will carry the essence of all he has lived for. When he finishes, he folds the paper with care. It is a simple act, but it carries a solemnity, as though he were placing his own heart into an envelope. The guards will find it later, hidden in a small oil lamp waiting to be discovered. When it is read aloud, the world will recognize it not only as poetry but as prophecy. The poem will be called Mi Ultimo Adios, my last farewell. Yet even in farewell, it is more greeting than departure. It is a farewell to life, but a greeting to eternity. A farewell to his body, but a greeting to the future of his nation. Beyond the prison walls, the city stirs faintly with rumor. Some already suspect his end is near. Yet no one outside can imagine the depth of what is being born within these quiet hours. A man sentenced to die is giving life, word by word, to a nation that does not yet know its own strength. The lamp burns lower, the ink dries. The silence of the cell deepens into a kind of sacred hush. Rizal leans back, his work complete. There is no need for more. The poem says all that remains: love, forgiveness, faith, farewell. It is the distillation of a life, a soul poured into verse. He rests. Tomorrow will come. He does not resist it. He does not curse it. Instead, he prepares to meet it with the serenity of one who has already given everything. For what more can empire take from a man who has turned his death into a poem and his poem into eternity? And so the night passes. The words wait quietly in the lamp, waiting to be found, waiting to travel beyond the prison, beyond the century, beyond the world he leaves. The man will die, but the poem will live. It will speak to Filipinos yet unborn, to children in schools, to lovers, to dreamers, to freedom fighters. It will echo in plazas and in classrooms, in whispered prayers and in songs sung at dawn. It is his last farewell, and yet somehow it feels like the beginning of something endless. The poem rests in silence, its words glowing like embers in the dark. Tomorrow, the rifles will fire, but tonight the verses breathe. And as the first light of dawn approaches, so too does the walk toward death. The morning breaks, pale and reluctant, as though the sky itself hesitates to reveal the day. December 30th, 1896. Manila stirs under a hush that feels heavier than any storm. At Bagumbayan Field, later to be called Lunetov, soldiers stand ready, rifles glinting in the dim light, their boots pressed into the damp earth. The city holds its breath. Word has spread that Jose Rizal, the doctor, the poet, the exile returned in chains, will be executed at dawn. For some, he is a traitor. For others, he is the nation's heart. And for many, he is both wound and healing. Inside the prison walls, Rizal has already risen. He has slept little, but his face carries no shadow of fear. He dresses with care, as though he were preparing for a final audience not with men, but with eternity. He buttons his black coat, adjusts his tie, and combs his hair with deliberate calm. Even now, in the narrow corridor of death, he embodies dignity. As the guards approach, he nods gently, acknowledging them without bitterness. His footsteps echo in the corridor, firm, unhurried. The silence is thick. But in his mind there is music, the memory of childhood fields, the voices of his family, the tender verses of Mi Ultimo Adios, which even now ripple like waves in his heart. The gates open, light streams in, pale gold upon the stone. Rizal steps into the morning air, breathing deeply as though this breath might carry him across the threshold between life and legacy. The path to Bagumbayan is lined with soldiers. Their rifles gleam like iron teeth, but Rizal does not falter. The crowd has gathered at a distance, hemmed in by bayonets. Some avert their eyes, others weep silently. A few whisper prayers under their breath. As he walks, Rizal carries himself not as a condemned man, but as one who has accepted the weight of his fate, transforming it into a gift. His shoes tap the earth with steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. His gaze remains forward, steady, unbroken. At the field, the preparations are already complete. A group of Filipino soldiers, under command of Spanish officers, stand ready to form the firing squad. The symbolism is cruel. Filipinos ordered to kill the Filipino who had spoken most fiercely of their dignity. But Rizal does not flinch. He understands. Perhaps he even forgives. They offer him a blindfold. He refuses. His voice is calm, clear, known. I will face it. He wants to meet the bullets with open eyes, to greet death not as a thief, but as a guest expected. He asks only that he might face his executioners. The request is denied. By decree, he must fall with his back to them, like a traitor. Yet even this last indignity cannot bind him. For Rizal carries a final choice within him, and it is this the manner in which he will fall. He stands tall, hands tied, eyes steady. The command is given. The soldiers raise their rifles. Time slows, stretched thin like glass about to shatter. Rizal lifts his chin, his lips move, and in that instant, his final words pass into history, soft yet eternal. Consummatum est. It is finished. The phrase, Christ's last on the cross, falls like a whisper of surrender, yet also of triumph, a life's work complete, a vision entrusted to the future. The rifles crack, thunder shattering the dawn. Smoke rises, acrid and sharp. Rizal's body twists, but not as they intended. Summoning the last strength of will, he turns as he falls, collapsing onto his back, his face lifted toward the morning sky. And so he dies, not with his eyes hidden, not with his back in shame, but facing the sun. The silence after the volley is immense. The soldiers lower their rifles, the crowd trembles, the field seems to exhale. A man has fallen, but something larger has risen. Something no bullet can strike down. In the stillness, the earth receives him, but the vision he carried, of dignity, of nationhood, of a people awakened, has slipped free from his body and taken root in the hearts of those who watched, those who wept, those who whispered his name as though it were prayer. The sun climbs higher. Its light spills upon the field, upon the soldiers, upon the fallen man whose blood darkens the soil. And in that light there is the sense of a beginning hidden inside the ending. Rizal is gone, yet in his final act he has given his people a memory that will burn longer than any empire, brighter than any rifle's fire. The day moves forward, as days always do. But for those who stood witness, time itself has shifted. The death of one man has become the birth of many. His silence speaks louder than the commands of kings. His stillness moves faster than the march of armies. The dawn of December 30 is heavy with grief. Yet beneath its weight, a seed stirs, the seed of a nation not yet born, but already awake. The sun rises over Bagumbayan, washing sorrow with light. Rizal's body lies still, yet his words, his final gaze, and his whispered, consummatum est, remain alive. And as the smoke of the rifles fades, a question begins to echo in every heart: what is stronger, the silence of death or the voice of memory? Morning breaks over Manila with the weight of silence. The echo of gunfire still lingers in the air, though the sound has faded into memory. At Bagumbayan, where Jose Rizal's body has fallen, the dust settles like ash. The soldiers march away, their rifles emptied, their duty completed. But something deeper begins to stir in the hearts of the people who witnessed the final moment. They had seen a man walk to his death with the calmness of prayer. They had seen him fall not in shame, but in defiance, facing the rising sun, and though his body lies still, his spirit begins to travel faster than any soldier can chase. Word spreads with the quickness of breath. From the plazas of Intramuros to the fishing boats, along the shores of Cavite, the message moves: Rizal is dead. Each voice carries the news with a tremor, as though speaking it aloud makes the wound sharper. Mothers clasp their children to their chests. Old men bow their heads, whispering prayers. Students, who once read his novels in secret, feel the ink of his words burn brighter in memory. His death does not silence him, it magnifies him. In homes lit by candles, families gather to speak his name. They remember him not only as a writer, nor as a doctor, nor as an exile, but as a son of the same soil, a brother of the same pain. He had dared to speak when so many were afraid. Now, by dying, he has entered the quiet of every household. The sorrow is heavy, yes, but within the sorrow is a current of awakening. The people weep, but their tears fall upon seeds already planted. The Spanish authorities believe they have ended a danger. They imagine that by extinguishing his life, they have preserved their empire's hold. Yet they do not see what grows in the silence of mourning. They do not hear the whispers in the dark alleys of Tondo, or the murmurs that pass from market stall to market stall. They cannot feel the trembling that runs through the countryside, where farmers set down their tools and look toward Manila with grief hardening into resolve. Across the islands, bells toll for the dead. In the small town of Calamba, his family bears the deepest wound. Teodora, the mother who once taught him to pray, receives the blow with both dignity and unbearable sorrow. His brothers and sisters gather close, carrying the memory of the boy who once played by the lake, now gone forever. They are not allowed to claim his body, not permitted to mourn openly. Yet, even in their enforced silence, the people know. Word travels beyond the censors, beyond the guards, beyond the walls of empire. Grief becomes a strange teacher. It teaches the people that a life lived in courage is never wasted. It teaches them that a man without weapons, who held only pen and vision, could wound an empire more deeply than an army. His death reveals something that had long been whispered but never believed, that the Filipino spirit is greater than its chains. In the barrios, women hum lullabies that carry fragments of his poetry. Young men recite his words under the stars, vowing to remember them. Farmers speak of him while planting rice, as though his memory, like water, nourishes the fields. Children, too young to understand the weight of empire, grow up with his name already bound to the idea of hope. He becomes a presence everywhere, like the wind, unseen but felt. The plazas become places of quiet rebellion. People gather in small circles, not shouting, not rioting, but speaking of him. They recall his novels, Noli me Tangere, Il Filibusterismo, and retell their stories as though they were scripture. His characters, once confined to pages, now walk among them. Ibarra, Elias, Caesar, all live again, not as fiction, but as truths mirrored in the faces of the living. The people see themselves reflected more clearly now, as though Rizal's death has polished the glass. The grief is not simple mourning. It carries a double edge. On one side, it is the sorrow of a people robbed of their brightest sun. On the other, it is the kindling of a fire that will not go out. The empire has created a martyr. The bullet that pierced his body has also pierced the illusion of Spain's invincibility. His execution, meant to frighten, instead unites. His silence in death speaks louder than his voice in life. Bonifacio hears the news and feels the tremor in his bones. For him, the death of Rizal is not an ending, but a beginning. The Katipunan whispers grow louder, more insistent. If Rizal's words opened the door, his death pushes it wide. The fire he refused to light with violence now burns in those who can no longer wait. His gentleness gives birth to their fervor. His surrender gives rise to their uprising. Yet in this chapter of mourning, the revolution is still a murmur, not yet a roar. What dominates the air is sorrow, heavy as smoke after a fire. People walk the streets with eyes lowered, as though the city itself has lost its light. At dusk, the sky glows with a red that feels like mourning cloth spread across the heavens. In the stillness, the memory of his calm final steps returns again and again. It becomes a rhythm in the hearts of the people, a heartbeat they cannot ignore. This is how nations are born, not in a single shout, but in the quiet accumulation of grief turned to resolve. Rizal's death teaches the people that loss can be a seed, that mourning can ripen into courage. In the tender hush of sorrow, something begins to grow that even empire cannot uproot. As the nights pass and candles burn in windows, a question stirs in every Filipino home. If one man could face death without fear, what might we together dare to face? In the hush of grief, the people begin to feel the stirring of something greater than sorrow. From mourning, a spark takes shape, one that will soon leap into flame as the revolution ignites. Night falls heavy over the archipelago, but the silence is no longer passive. It carries within it a pulse, the faint drumming of a nation's awakening. Rizal's body has returned to dust, but the echo of his death is everywhere. In the candlelit homes where families grieved him, a change begins to stir. Tears, once shed in helplessness, now harden into vows. His final walk to the firing squad lingers in memory, not as defeat, but as a call no one can unhear. In the alleys of Tondo, in secret meeting houses, men whisper more urgently. The Katipunan, once hidden in the shadows, growing quietly like roots beneath the soil, feels the shift. Andres Bonifacio, the plebeian who rose from poverty, holds Rizal's memory like a burning coal. For years he had admired the doctor poet, folding copies of Noli, Tangere, and El Filibusterismo into his satchel as though they were weapons. He revered Rizal's brilliance, yet where Rizal dreamed of reform through words, Bonifacio now sees no path but fire. The execution makes the choice clear. If even a man of gentleness and reason, a man who never raised a sword, could be silenced by bullets, what hope remained in petitions and letters? Spain had written its verdict in blood. Bonifacio and his companions, Jacinto de Valenzuela, begin to speak openly of uprising. The Katipunan, bound by oaths and secrecy, beats faster like a heart preparing to burst. Across Manila, the secret society multiplies in number. Farmers, clerks, artisans, students, ordinary men and women slip into its fold. They swear loyalty by cutting their wrists and signing in blood, by pledging lives not to Spain, but to the imagined future of a free nation. In their gatherings, they chant of liberty, their voices trembling but firm. Where once they hesitated, now Rizal's death emboldens them. His calm acceptance of fate becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. The revolution is not yet thunder, it begins as a murmur, like wind gathering before a storm. In August of 1896, discovery comes suddenly. The Katipunan's existence is revealed. Spanish authorities, alerted by betrayal, raid their printing presses, seize their lists, hunt their leaders. Panic ripples through the movement, but with it comes resolve. Bonifacio calls his followers together in the fields of Balintawak. Under the open sky, they tear their cedulars, the hated residents' certificates, into shreds. Paper breaks like chains. The gesture is simple, yet profound. In the tearing of documents, an entire people declares, "We are no longer yours." This is the cry of Balintawak, the breaking of silence into defiance. Men and women raise their voices, crying for freedom with the rawness of first breath. From that moment, the revolution is no longer theory, it is life embodied. The paper dreams of Rizal turn to the steel of bolos and the wood of rifles. The blood that signed oaths now prepares to spill on battlefields. Spain reacts with force. Soldiers march into villages, hunting rebels with merciless precision. Yet the movement cannot be crushed. The revolution spreads like fire through dry fields, unstoppable, devouring, illuminating. In Cavite, Leaders like Emilio Aguinaldo organized their own fronts, carving paths of resistance. In Pampanga, in Laguna, in Batangas, the call is the same, Kalaya and freedom. The word rolls from tongue to tongue, louder than the empire's cannons. Still, Rizal's shadow remains. Bonifacio invokes his name as a banner of unity. Though Rizal never called for bloodshed, though his dream was one of learning and reason, his death is taken as permission by those who can no longer wait. He is imagined in their chants, his calm eyes watching as they lift their weapons. To them, his silence on the scaffold was not only surrender, but also benediction. His martyrdom sanctifies their cause. The early battles are fierce, but also uneven. Many of the revolutionaries carry only bolos and spears against Spain's rifles. They march barefoot, fueled not by weapons but by conviction. Some victories come, small and symbolic. In Cavite, rebel groups manage to defeat Spanish troops, seizing towns and hoisting banners of the sun. For the first time, the dream of an independent Philippines feels tangible. For the first time, Spain trembles at the thought that its hold might not be eternal. But the revolution is fragile, its leaders divided, its strategies uncertain. Bonifacio, fiery and uncompromising, clashes with Aguinaldo, who favors discipline and hierarchy. The struggle for freedom is stained by rivalries, even as the people shed blood together. Still, the fire cannot be undone. Even in failure, battles echo like thunder across the islands, and beneath it all, Rizal remains. His image, his words, his sacrifice, these bind the revolution's soul even as its body stumbles. Soldiers carry copies of his poems folded in their pockets, stained with sweat and sometimes blood. Mothers name their sons after him, as though to weave his presence into future generations. His death gave them permission to dream, and once a dream is released into the world, it cannot be imprisoned again. The empire grows desperate. It executes more men. Gombaza's fate repeated. Bonifacio himself eventually betrayed, captured, killed. Yet for each fallen leader, another rises. The revolution is no longer contained in leaders. It is carried in the marrow of the people. It is the song sung at night when soldiers pass. It is the courage that refuses to bend, the resolve to endure. History bends slowly, painfully. Victories are won and lost, lives sacrificed. Yet, in the great sweep of time, the revolution marks the moment when the Philippines ceases to see itself merely as colony and begins to imagine itself as nation. And though Rizal did not live to witness it, though he never held a weapon nor commanded an army, his absence became the most powerful presence. His execution was the strike that set the archipelago ablaze. The revolution ignites, not as a single flame, but as thousands of small fires carried in the hands and hearts of ordinary people. And once lit, the night of empire can no longer be so dark. The revolution has begun, carried forward by fire and blood, yet guided still by the quiet memory of a man who chose words over weapons. Soon the world will ask, what end awaits a nation born in both sorrow and defiance? Time flows like a slow river, carrying away the immediate noise of cannons, the hurried steps of soldiers, the cries of the first revolution. But though the years pass, some things are not washed away. Instead, they grow clearer, more luminous, as though polished by memory itself. Rizal, the man who fell beneath Spanish rifles, becomes not smaller with distance, but larger. The farther history moves from that December morning, the more his figure shines, not only as a memory of one man, but as the eternal presence of a nation's conscience. At first, He is remembered as the martyr of Bagumbayan. The place of his death becomes sacred ground, whispered about in reverence. Flowers are left where the dust once held his body. Children are told the story of his final walk, his refusal of the blindfold, his eyes fixed upon the dawn. In these retellings, Rizal is no longer just a poet or doctor. He is transformed into symbol. The revolution that rose after his death burns fiercely, falters, then burns again. Empires change hands, battles are fought and lost, and yet Rizal remains constant. Spain may fall, America may arrive. The tides of history may sweep across the islands, but his memory does not bend. It stands like a lighthouse on a rocky shore, steady, unmoving, guiding. For the people, Rizal becomes more than history. He becomes mirror. His novels, once banned, are read aloud with pride. His characters, Elias, Ibarra, Maria Clara, Caesar, are no longer merely fictional. They are reflections of the Filipino heart. Through them, people see their own wounds, their own resilience. To speak of Rizal is to speak of themselves. To mourn his death is to claim his dream. Decades turn, but his face is everywhere. His likeness is carved into stone, painted on canvas, carried in pocket medallions. In plazas, his statues rise, tall and solemn, pointing the way forward. The young gaze up at him and find inspiration. The old bow their heads and find comfort. His image, captured again and again, does not age. He remains forever the man of 35, his eyes thoughtful, his mustache precise, his expression both gentle and unyielding. He is remembered not only as martyr, but as lover. His tenderness toward Josephine Bracken lingers in whispered stories, his letters carrying words of devotion even in the face of death. Lovers see in him the truth that even amidst duty and sacrifice, the human heart longs for affection. He is remembered as son, as brother, as friend. His humanity never erased by his martyrdom, but made more profound by it. And yet it is his role as conscience that endures most deeply. He becomes the standard against which the nation measures itself. When leaders falter, his words return like echoes, reminding them of responsibility. When freedom feels fragile, his name is invoked as shield. When Filipinos wonder who they are, they look to him and see both wound and hope, both suffering and dignity. Years pass, and his story travels beyond the Philippines. In Madrid, scholars recall the brilliant student who once walked their halls. In Heidelberg, professors remember the young doctor with sharp eyes and sharper questions. In distant lands, his poems are translated, his novels studied. He ceases to belong only to the archipelago. He becomes a citizen of the world, a figure whose courage speaks across oceans. But in the Philippines, his presence is most intimate. In schools, children recite Mi Ultimo Adios, their voices soft but steady. In every town, a street bears his name, a plaza his statue, a school his memory. December 30 becomes a ritual of remembrance, Rizal Day, when flags are raised at half-mast and voices recall his final sacrifice. The nation, fragmented by geography, by language, by the push and pull of history, finds in him a common thread. He is the gentle thread that binds an archipelago into something more than scattered islands. Even as independence finally comes, fragile and complex, Rizal's shadow does not fade. He becomes the symbol of what liberty should mean. Not merely a change of rulers, but the flowering of dignity, education, justice. His life reminds each generation that freedom is not a gift, nor a prize, but a duty that must be carried forward. There is a paradox in his symbol. He is remembered as the man who never lifted a sword, yet he inspires revolutions. He is honored for his words of peace, yet his death gives rise to war. He is celebrated for his gentleness, yet he ignites a fire that refuses to die. In this paradox lies his eternal power. He is not bound to one interpretation, not confined to one role. He is martyr and dreamer, poet and warrior, lover and conscience, all at once, all enduring. Time continues its long march. The world changes. Cities rise, empires collapse, generations are born and buried. Yet Rizal's presence endures, steady as a star. In moments of despair, his memory returns as reminder that even one fragile life, held with courage and vision, can alter the course of history. The eternal symbol of Rizal is not only carved in statues or written in books. It lives in the quiet choices of ordinary people, in the student who studies by candlelight, believing knowledge is power, in the farmer who tills his land with dignity, in the mother who teaches her child to pray and to hope, in the worker who dreams of justice. His spirit is not trapped in marble or bronze. It moves in the bloodstream of the people, generation after generation. Thus, Rizal is never past. He is always present, always near, a mirror held up to remind Filipinos of who they are and who they might yet become. His life and death, once the story of a single man, have become the heartbeat of a nation, and so Rizal remains. No longer just a man, but the eternal symbol of a people's soul. Yet symbols must find their fulfillment, and his dream still waits, unfolding slowly in the fragile dawn of a nation newly born. History moves slowly like a tide. It ebbs and flows, sometimes advancing with force, sometimes retreating into silence. For the Philippines, the tide of independence comes in waves, uncertain, fractured, yet irresistible. Rizal is long gone when the archipelago first tastes freedom, yet his presence hangs in the air, as though the nation cannot step forward without first walking through the shadow of his memory. The revolution he did not call for burns fiercely in the years after his death. Bonifacio and the Katipunan lead the first charge, and though their uprising struggles and falters, its fire is not extinguished. Others rise in their place. Aguinaldo and his men in Cavite, soldiers and farmers who fight not with polished weapons but with conviction. They march beneath the same sun Rizal once faced, believing it will one day rise over a free land. By 1898, the Spanish Empire, weakened by both rebellion and foreign war, finally loosens its grip. The Philippine flag is unfurled in Cavite, and the air trembles with the proclamation of independence. It is June 12, a date that will echo across the generations. In that moment, the people claim themselves no longer subjects of empire, but children of their own destiny. And yet, even in that triumph, Rizal's absence is keenly felt. The declaration may belong to Aguinaldo and his generals, but the spirit behind it, quiet, unyielding, luminous, belongs to Rizal. His death has prepared the soil from which this fragile seedling of freedom emerges. But history is never a straight line. No sooner has the flag risen than another empire arrives. The Americans come, cloaked in the language of liberation, but bearing their own ambitions. The Philippines becomes a colony once more, this time under a different master. For decades, the dream of independence is suspended, its promise both near and distant. And yet, Rizal's name endures. His words are taught in classrooms under American rule. His poems and novels are printed, recited, translated. The colonizers may bring new flags, new laws, new rulers, but they cannot erase the memory of the man who fell facing the sun. In time, the United States grants independence, though not without struggle, on July 4, 1946. The Philippines stands again as its own republic. Fireworks and parades mark the moment, but beneath the celebration is fragility. The nation is young, its wounds still raw, its path uncertain. Independence is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a long, arduous journey. Rizal's vision, fragile yet enduring, becomes the compass. What was his dream? It was never spelled out in manifestos or carved in rigid slogans. Rizal dreamed not only of freedom from empire, but of a people educated, dignified, awake. He dreamed of a nation that would not simply change rulers, but rise in its own strength, bound together by justice and compassion. His letters, his novels, his final poem, each carried fragments of this dream. He imagined a Philippines where knowledge would conquer ignorance, where dignity would replace oppression, where love for the land and its people would be stronger than the swords of conquerors. Generations that follow wrestle with this dream. Wars test it, poverty strains it, politics threatens it. Yet in every difficulty, Rizal's name is invoked. He becomes not only a memory, but a measure. Leaders are judged by his standard. Do they carry the same courage, the same vision, the same devotion to truth? Citizens, too, are reminded of their duty. His death was not only sacrifice, it was an invitation passed down to each Filipino to carry forward the dream he left unfinished. Statues of Rizal rise in every city, in every town plaza. They are not mere monuments of stone and bronze. They are reminders carved against forgetfulness. Children learn his life from the moment they enter school. They recite his poems, act out scenes from his novels, whisper his words in classrooms as though speaking with him across time. December 30, the day of his martyrdom, becomes a national day of mourning and reflection. Flags are raised at half-mast, and voices remember the man who died so his nation could live. And yet, Rizal's presence is not confined to ceremonies. He lingers in quieter spaces. In the student hunched over books at night, believing knowledge can lift the poor. In the mother who teaches her child to pray and to hope. In the farmer who tills his land with dignity, remembering that the soil itself holds the blood of martyrs. In the worker who demands justice, invoking Rizal's name as shield. His dream breathes not in marble or bronze, but in the living heartbeat of a people who still long to fulfill it. As years turn into decades, the Philippines learns that independence is not a final prize, but a daily task. Corruption, inequality, and division threaten the fragile freedom. Empires may have left, but shadows of oppression linger within. In these moments of disillusion, Rizal's voice returns. His writings remind the nation that freedom without virtue is hollow, that liberty without responsibility is fragile, that independence must be guarded not only from outside conquerors, but from within. Rizal is not a ghost of the past, he is a companion of the present. His memory walks beside the nation in times of triumph and in times of trial. He is called upon in revolutions against dictatorships, in struggles for democracy, in battles for justice. His dream continues to ask questions. Have we built the nation he imagined? Have we honored his sacrifice with the lives we lead? Have we carried forward the hope that he entrusted to us? The answers are never simple. The Philippines remains a land of contradictions, rich in beauty, yet scarred by hardship, vibrant in culture, yet burdened by struggle. And yet, Rizal's presence insists that the story is not over. The dream is not complete, but it is alive. Each generation is asked to write its chapter, to carry his memory not as a burden, but as a torch. In the stillness of night, when the city streets quiet and the stars hang over the islands, Rizal's spirit feels near. It is in the whisper of the waves against the shores of Laguna de Bay, where he once played as a child. It is in the wind through the fields of Calamba, where his family once sowed and reaped. It is in the silence of Bagum Bayan, where he faced his final dawn. He remains not a shadow, but as light, a man who died so his nation could live, and who continues to live wherever courage and hope are found. The Philippines, fragile and unfinished, carries him still, not as idol, not as saint, but as mirror. In his reflection, the people see both their failures and their possibilities. His dream waits, unfolding slowly like the dawn that follows a long night. And just as he faced the sun in his final breath, so too the nation he dreamed continues to turn toward light. And so the story of Jose Rizal does not end in death, nor even in independence. It endures in every choice, every struggle, every hope of the people who still walk beneath his sky. For in the quiet truth of history he remains, not only the man who died so his nation could live, but the dream that reminds it how to live still. And so we gently close the book of his life. The candle of his story flickers low, yet its flame does not go out. Jose Rizal, the poet, the doctor, the dreamer, the martyr, still breathes in the hush of memory. His death was not an ending, but a seed. His words became roots, his courage became branches, and his sacrifice still blossoms quietly across the centuries. Though time has carried us far from that December morning, his voice still hums in the silence like an echo that refuses to fade. He reminds us that even the gentlest souls can turn the course of nations, that strength can be tender and resistance can be whispered in ink. And tonight, as you rest, you carry with you not just his story, but the deeper truth that history's greatest torches are often lit by the smallest, most fragile flames. Thank you, dear listener, for sharing this quiet space with me tonight. In the stillness of your room, in the rhythm of your breathing, you are part of something timeless, a chain of memory stretching back through centuries, carried forward by hearts like yours. It is a quiet joy to know that across oceans and distances we can meet here together in the soft glow of history's lullaby. Now, let the story rest. Let the weight of the day slip gently from your shoulders. You have wandered through time, and now it is time to wander through dreams. May your sleep be gentle, your night untroubled, your spirit held in peace. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in. If this story has brought you comfort, you are always welcome to return. Whenever the night calls for stillness and a voice to guide you back through time. So close your eyes now. The candle burns low, the sands of the hourglass settle. Rest well, dear dreamer, beneath the hush of history's lullaby.